Critics are raving about The Power of the Dog by Jane Campion. Is this movie any good? Should you watch it? Starring Benedict Cumberbatch and, you see him naked. Let me give you my view, which is going to be quite different from everyone else's, coming up next. The Power of the Dog is kind of a western set in Montana in 1925. This was filmed in New Zealand, and it is based on a 1960s novel. People might call this an anti-western, an anti-cowboy narrative. There's a lot of that in it. It's going to be a slow burn, not much story in it. Arguably, nothing happens. Everybody looks bored and unhappy. This is a hazy-looking movie, so you're not going to watch this for entertainment purposes. You really need to concentrate on all the images you're seeing, on the dialogue connecting various parts of this movie to really get anything out of it. This is for critics looking for stuff. I don't think this is going to be for ordinary audiences at all. That's a fair warning. It doesn't mean you shouldn't watch it. It's just a warning to those of you who think this is going to be entertaining. I think this film's essence is best described in its symbols and its style rather than its story, but I'll give you a brief story overview anyway. There are two brothers. They're ranchers, played by Benedict Cumberbatch and Jesse Plemons. Phil Burbank is the name of the character for Cumberbatch, and he is being acclaimed for his acting here. I guess if you really like Cumberbatch, you definitely should see this movie. Anyway, Phil is an angry sort of guy. He reminds you of the character in There Will Be Blood. Very nasty to his brother. He calls him Fatso. He seems to be upset all the time, angry. He's this powerful alpha male type. Critics are calling him toxically masculine. We'll explore that comment in just a little bit. Phil's brother George, played by Jesse Plemons, marries a woman who has a son. She's a widow, and Phil thinks she is out to get money from him. He doesn't like her at all. He doesn't like the son either, because this son is quote-unquote effeminate. He's called not human by Phil in this story. Thus you have this tough guy, male rancher, cowboy type, looking down on, condescending to a younger man, an awkward, gangly teenage guy who, yeah, he's probably a homosexual, repressed homosexual, and he likes art a lot. This kid is very good at art. That's the way these characters are described in this movie exactly. So basically the story is a western with a family squabble, and honestly not much happens in it. So let's look at the symbols. One is the opening shot, a bunch of bulls. It's murky, and they're moving around randomly. This idea of the bull's hides and then piercing into the bulls, actually cutting them open, getting their hides. At one point, Phil castrates a bull, and you will see a bull castrated in this movie. You know, you're going inside the bull, so the questions of appearances, what's on the outside versus reality, show up. And then, of course, is about Phil. He seems like to be an angry, degenerate, upset, tough guy. But when we look on the inside in this movie, it gives us some access to his inner life or private life. We see him in private at times. And we see maybe a different person, more complex person. This film, I think, wants to slightly humanize what it might label as toxically masculine. And Phil, as you'll see, is an artist. He likes the banjo. Is he repressed? Is he maybe a homosexual? That movie brings up this question, doesn't answer it very clearly in my opinion, and so it leaves it open to interpretation for viewers. Another symbol coming up are the hills. You'll see these characters and the hills as a background, and the hills will either dominate over them or the characters will dominate over the hills. And on the hill is an image or a symbol that only Phil's hero could see. Phil was taught ranching by Bronco Henry, whose saddle is in their barn in a special place with a little placard there. Bronco Henry, the ultimate tough guy cowboy in Phil's mind, saw an image on the hills, and Phil thinks that image is really neat. That comes up later in the movie, and those who have insight, those who can see images, versus those who can't, and those who can see the real reality or the real symbols. All that stuff comes up in this movie. This movie is murky and hazy cinematographically. It's very brownish, sort of sandy, and so it's hard to look at, hard to see with low lighting. And yet those who have insight to see, I think, is another metaphor here with Phil. We see him in a certain way. If we only label him or stereotype him, as we do with any character, then we only see the surface or the hide. What's inside the hide? I think that's of importance to this movie. Of course, artistry. Phil is maybe an artist with his banjo. The female, the mother here, played by Kirsten Dunst, she wants to play piano. She has a hard time performing for the public. And then her son, of course, is an artist, and we see his artwork in this movie. Those things come up, and what is an artist to do in a remote ranching location where there's really no value for much art? The job is to take care of bulls, sell bulls and cows and all that. What good is art in this place? And I think that question comes up as well. There are at least a dozen more symbols. There's a lot of phallic imagery in this movie because we're talking about male repression, male homosexuality maybe in the West or in Montana circa 1925. And so you get knives, you get bulls being castrated, as I said, you get cigarettes, you get Phil's banjo, you get ropes. And of course, you do see Benedict Cumberbatch naked in this movie. I'm sure that's going to be a draw for a few people. What is all this phallic imagery about? I will leave that to you to find out. There are at least probably a dozen more symbols or images in this movie that we can analyze, and you bring them all together. This movie is a feast for critics who want to look around and make sense of movies, try to interpret it, but it's a slow burn. And I don't think a lot of people are going to like this movie who turn it on, especially Benedict Cumberbatch fans, looking just for one of his amazing performances as Sherlock or Doctor Strange or Khan. This is not that movie. I wanted to respect this movie. I wanted to see it as like true, real good, complex art. I think it might be, but I also was terribly frustrated by it. A little bit bored. Certainly didn't care for the story much, and there's much more style here than story, and the music is a little grating. I'm not in love with Johnny Greenwood's scores. I guess I like something a little bit more melodic. So if you're in for a downer of a movie that is going to be, as Netflix labels this movie, cerebral and understated, it's exactly what you're going to get here. I probably was either not in the mood for it or really think it's not as good as people are calling it. So I'm only going to give it 2.5 stars. I could probably go even lower than that if I wanted to get cynical about this movie, which is very easy to do. I'm not sure what the value is here, so let us know in the comments what you think of this movie. Were you transformed by it? Did you see good insights in it? Were you hypnotized by it? What is good about this movie? Let us know in the comments. And I don't want just adjectives like good or great. I want literal descriptions of what's in the movie and why what's in the movie is great, because that's what's important to me. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel. Have a great day.